Tears unnumbered ye shall shed, and the Valar will fence Valinor against you, and shut you out, so that not even the echo of your lamentation shall pass over the mountains. On the house of Fëanor, the wrath of the Valar lieth from the west unto the uttermost east, and upon all that will follow them it shall be laid also. Their oath shall drive them, and yet betray them, and ever snatch away the very treasures that they have sworn to pursue. To evil end shall all things turn, that they begin well, and by treason of kin unto kin, and the fear of treason, shall this come to pass. The dispossessed shall they be forever. Ye have spilled the blood of your kindred unrighteously, and have stained the land of Aman. For blood ye shall render blood, and beyond Aman ye shall dwell in death's shadow. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will be discussing the sorrowful yet important battles called the Kinslayings in the First Age of Middle-earth. These were bloodbaths between elves, the firstborn. There were 3 of them, and concerning each, as we do in this series, we will first discuss what commanders and warriors were on each side, and then the story concerning the history of how these battles came to be. There will be, of course, some related articles and videos in the description and cards, so please check those out. My friends, thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Let's begin our tale. We start, of course, with the first kinslaying at Alqualondë, which occurred in approximately 1495 of the Years of the Trees, or 1 to 2 years afterwards, since the Valian years are difficult to measure. Of all the kinslayings, this is the most infamous, and is often referred to as simply the kinslaying, for its infamy and disgrace was widely known amongst elves during the Elder Days, and it, along with the Oath of Fëanor, was one of the first causes of many for the doom of the Noldor, as foretold by Mandos, the doomsman of the Valar, and the many sorrows that befell the Eldar throughout the First Age, as this predates the next kinslayings by centuries. Let's discuss each side and their forces. On the side of the defending elves at Alqualondë, the Falmari or wave folk of the Teleri, Olwe, brother of Elwë or Thingol, led his folk. These elves numbered in at least the thousands or more. That is all the power they had, for indeed they were not warriors, and few were in this age of the world. Rather, they were boat builders. On the side of the attackers, Fëanor, son of Finwë and High King of the Noldor at that time, led the vanguard of the Noldor who were leaving Aman, the Blessed Land. He, of course, had his 7 sons, who would also lead his forces. And behind him, bringing up the front of Fingolfin's greater Noldoran host, was Fingon, son of Fingolfin, and he would command some of the later coming Noldor in this fight. With Fëanor and then Fingon were surely many more elves than those at the harbors of Alqualondë at that time, being in the thousands or tens of thousands. Now with each side in mind, let's discuss the story of this kinslaying. After the destruction of the 2 trees of Valinor and the murder of Finwë, and the theft of the Silmarils by Melkor, Fëanor and his sons made an oath of vengeance to retrieve their Silmarils, and they made to depart Valinor, even as the Valar warned them against this action. Fëanor would not heed them, and he desired to make war on Melkor, rather than to stay in the darkness that had overtaken the west, even if the elves should fail. Thus the Noldor departed the city of Sirion, and made for the north, for the ships of their friends and allies the Teleri, hoping they could use such boats to cross the sea and go east into Middle-earth, with the help of their friends. But when Fëanor arrived, Olwe told him, in friendship, that the Noldor could not use the boats of the Teleri, those that were as precious to them as the gems of the Noldor were to them. They especially could not use them to disobey the Valar. Olwe warned Fëanor against this course of action, and though the argument was heated, nothing could change Fëanor's mind. When enough of his forces arrived as Fëanor deemed fit, he and his Noldor began to forcibly start manning the ships of the Teleri, and the Teleri threw some of the Noldor into the bay. Then swords were drawn, and on the quays and piers, and on the great arch of the haven's gate, blood on both sides was spilled. Thrice were the Noldor of Fëanor driven back, but then Fingon came and thought the Teleri had waylaid the Noldor at the bidding of the Valar. Thus, not understanding what had started this, Fingon joined his elves to the Noldor of Fëanor. The Teleri were thus overcome, for they had less strength, being armed for the most part with slender bows against all the fury of the Noldor, the crafters, who began rowing the Teleri's ships away. Olwe called upon Ose, a Maya of the seas, but he did not aid them, for it was not permitted by the Valar that the flight of the Noldor should be hindered by force. However, Uinen, another Maya of the oceans, wept, and her tears brought chaos and destruction to many of the ships manned by the invaders. This would change much for the Noldor who flew into Middle-earth, for Mandos would tell them the curse laid on them for such a fell deed, as well as the oath that came before. Finarfin, brother of Fingolfin and Fëanor and his folk, would turn back after this and repent, for the kinship Finarfin shared with the Sea Elves of Alquilonde. And Thingol would never forgive the Elves who slew his brother's people, perpetuating a further divide between the Teleri and Noldor, even leading to Thingol outlawing the Noldoran tongue of Quenya in his realm of Doriath, which would make Sindarin the prominent elven language for the rest of the history of Middle-earth, all because of this one terrible event. These ships would be used by Fëanor's folk to cross the sea, and then they would be burned at Losgar and Beleriand, and the elves in Fingolfin's host, who made up the greater part of the host of the Noldor, were forced to cross through the Helcaraxe into Middle-earth, losing some of their folk to the bitter cold of that place. Fëanor deserted his own kind, thinking them to be needless baggage, and he would be slain soon after, in the Dagor Nuin Gileath, the battle under stars. But the sons of Fëanor would not escape the stain of kinslaying so quickly, and they would bear that guilt for the rest of their lives. Now we come to the second kinslaying and the ruin of Doriath, in 506 of the First Age. This occurred in the realm of Doriath, Thingol's realm, after his passing from the world. The defending side would be led by Dior Iluhil, the grandson of Thingol and the son of Beren and Luthien the Renowned, and he would lead the remaining forces of the Sindarin Elves of Doriath and Middle-earth at that time, which surely numbered in the thousands if not tens of thousands, for though this was one of the realms least affected by the wars with Morgoth, due to the Girdle of Melian, the death of Thingol, and the end of the Girdle followed by the Battle of the Thousand Caves against the dwarves of Nogrod, had greatly weakened these elven forces. On the attacking and invading side, the seven sons of Fëanor led the remainder of their forces from out of the northeastern part of Beleriand into Doriath, also surely numbering in the thousands or possibly tens of thousands, and greater indeed must this force have been than the defending one. Concerning the story of the second kinslaying, after the Battle of the Thousand Caves and the death of Thingol, Beren had recovered the Silmaril that he and Luthien had taken from Morgoth. It was at that time within the dwarven necklace, the Nauglamir. During the remainder of her life, Luthien wore the Silmaril and was the most beautiful and bright of all beings in Middle-earth, and also the most beloved. The sons of Fëanor would not dare to assail her in her home in Sirion while she yet lived. But after her death, and the death of Beren her husband, the Silmaril and Nauglamir came to Dior, the heir of Thingol, who ruled Doriath and its people as its new king. Word then reached the ears of the sons of Fëanor that a Silmaril of Fëanor burned once more in the woods of Doriath, just as it had done after the quest for the Silmaril. The oath of Fëanor, which his sons had also sworn, saying none could keep them from the Silmarils, was reawakened, and the sons desired their prize. At that time they wandered in the wild, having been too weak to hold their fortress at Himring in the north, and knew that, of the three Silmarils, two of which were with Morgoth, they could only really hope to capture the one from the Sindar, the Teleri. So they sent word of their claim to Dior, who sent no reply. Thus, in the middle of winter, the Fëanorians launched a surprise attack on Doriath. Dior fought with them in the Thousand Caves of Menegroth, the capital of Doriath, and so it came to pass that Dior slew Celegorm, and Curufin and Caranthir were also slain in the battle, first of the sons of Fëanor to die, and so too were slain Dior and his wife Nimloth, and many other elves besides. Their two young sons, Ilured and Ilurin, were seized by the evil servants of Celegorm and left in the forest to starve and perish. Maithros, eldest son of Fëanor, repented these actions and searched for the young half-elves, but they were gone, and none knew what became of them. The casualties were large on both sides. The sons of Fëanor would have had their prize, the second kinslaying, a complete victory, were it not for the daughter of Dior and their survivors from Doriath, who bore the Silmaril south to the mouths of Sirion and the havens that were there. This battle saw the total and final destruction of the realm of Doriath. Finally, we come to the third kinslaying, which is the most cruel and sorrowful of the three, due to who the combatants were and what they had already been through. This occurred in 538 of the First Age, between the remaining sons of Fëanor and their followers who were the attackers,
and the Elves of Sirion, the Defenders, who were, in large part, survivors from either Doriath or Gondolin. And indeed, not many were the warriors of those places who escaped death, but women and children, those who were injured, along with some warriors as well, for there were some elves who had lived there under Círdan the Shipwright for many years. These were also a peaceful people, shipbuilders at the edge of Beleriand. However, since it had been some years since the ruin of Doriath and the fall of Gondolin, those such as Elwing of Doriath or Eärendil of Gondolin had matured into adults. Looking at the forces of the sons of Fëanor, led by Maithros, Maglor, Amras, and Amrod, they probably only numbered in the hundreds. Maybe they numbered in the thousands, but they had suffered so many casualties and defeats throughout the First Age. On the side of the Defenders, there were no true commanders present until the battle was already over, and High King Gil-galad and Círdan arrived with their forces. Perhaps the closest person to a commander here was Elwing, who bore the Silmaril, and surely those here at the mouths of Sirion also numbered in the hundreds or maybe thousands, but again, they likely weren't the best of warriors, for those warriors had likely fallen with their realms. Concerning the story of it all, Maithros would learn that Elwing had survived the ruin of Doriath and dwelt in the havens of Sirion. She, of course, had the Silmaril still. He did nothing for a time, being weary of the oath he had taken, but at last fate and knowledge of the unfulfilled oath beckoned to him, and he once more gathered his forces and remaining brothers. He sent a friendly but stern warning to the people of the havens to give back the Silmaril to the sons of Fëanor. They would not part with it, however, for it was the jewel that Beren had won, Luthien had worn, and for which Dior had been slain. They also believed the Silmaril had brought healing and blessing upon their houses and ships. And so it was that the sons of Fëanor who yet lived came down suddenly upon these refugees of Gondolin and Doriath, and others besides, and utterly destroyed them. Some of the Fëanorians, however, seeing the terrible nature of the slaughter, turned against the sons of Fëanor and aided Elwing, even at the cost of many of their own lives. Amrod and Amros were slain, but the evil Fëanorians had victory, and indeed Gil-galad and Círdan came too late with their forces. Those few who were not slain joined to Gil-galad and went back with him to the island of Balar. The sons of Elwing and Eärendil, Elrond and Elros, were taken captive by Maglor, and Elwing had cast herself into the sea with the Silmaril, only to be saved by Ulmo and delivered to Eärendil, who was at the sea during all of this, in the likeness of a great white bird. Maglor would go on to raise Elrond and Elros as if they were his own children, and a good love came to grow between them, but such a love could not erase the past, nor the bloodshed. The doom of the Noldor wrought by the oath of Fëanor, the first kinslaying, was fulfilled, and Maithros and Maglor, even though they would eventually recover 2 of the Silmarils, kept by Morgoth, could not keep them, and they bore excruciating guilt from their deeds and a searing burning pain for their corruption from the Silmarils themselves. They could not free themselves of the oath of Fëanor, nor the doom of the Noldor, nor the guilt that followed. And each kinslaying that had happened had only aided Melkor, Morgoth, in the end. And so we come to the end of the tale of the kinslayings of the First Age of Middle-earth. From these battles we can learn much. We should not be so ambitious that we overcome all things to get the objects of our desire. And we should remember that, in wars between brothers and sisters, we all lose. Rather, we must always remember the ties of our kinship, and have compassion for one another, for are not all wars kinslayings? Thank you all so much for watching. Even if this was a rather sorrowful video, I do appreciate it. If you enjoyed or learned something, please hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections about the kinslayings? Let me know in the comments below. These really are sad battles, but they're quite important in the tale of the First Age and of its ambitious elves. I think these events show what differences there were between the elves and the Silmarillion, and it demonstrates the sorrow that kindred caused to and for itself. However, for something lighter and completely different, I'll put my video on the history of the Shire in the description to lighten the mood. To further support the channel, please check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Patreon for a podcast and Discord server. All of those links are in the description. I want to shout out our Valar tier patrons: Adrian De La Torre, Chris Ortner, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralik, Blair Scouten, Tobias Goldner, Ryan Ramsey, Adam Rink, Merton, John Hume, Tom Bombadil, Reggie93, Chip Slade, and Jennifer Wood. Thank you all, and thank you to all of my patrons so much. It really means a lot. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with an epic character history on Shelob, the Spider. Everyone, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.